Hey everyone, welcome to another episode. And before we get into the episode, I just wanted to give you guys a little update on how the event went. So, we did have the 3 year anniversary event this past Thursday, April 24th, and it went so much better than I expected it was going to go. It was so great seeing everyone together, past guests, future guests, business owners, immigrants. We had immigration attorneys show up and support. I was able to give a shout out to all the sponsors, to give thanks to all the listeners. And it was just so amazing to just see everyone gathering together and celebrate again the 3 years of the podcast, celebrate the awards, celebrate that it's ranking top 5%. And I was even able to get someone to sign up for the Substack. So the podcast officially has its first Substack paid subscriber. And so, exclusive content is always given to the paid subscribers behind the scenes and things like that. So, thank you so much for signing up. And if you also would like to support the podcast in that way, you can go ahead and do so. The link to sign up for the Substack is in the show notes and show description. It is just for $10 a month, or you can do yearly, whatever you're able to do. And yeah, just thank you so much. And I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and I am on the mission to change the narrative of immigration, one immigrant story at a time. And today I have a very special guest. I have Carla, the first gen coach, with us today, and she's going to be talking to us about growing up in Honduras and moving to the US, and then we'll get into her coaching and her podcast. So welcome, Carla. How are you?
Hi, Heidi. Thank you so much for having me. I am great now that I get to have this conversation with you.
I am so glad you're here. So I got connected with Carla actually from another podcast. I heard her on the Yo Quiero Dinero podcast. And so I was like, I want her on my podcast to share about her immigration experience. So I reached out, and I'm so glad you said yes, and so thankful. So why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself with to the audience, who you are, what you do, and then get right into growing up with life in Honduras.
Sure thing. So first of all, I didn't know that that's how you found me. So I love that. Shout out. Shout out to the Yo Quiero Dinero podcast. It was one of
Yes.
the first podcasts I started listening to. So
Oh,
very
nice.
exciting. So yeah, great connection there. So I guess a little bit about me. My name is Carla Santamaria. I go by Carla. Most people call me Carla. My family calls me Carla, but again, just is very important for me to say my name the way that it was given to me by my parents. It's how I honor my Latinidad. It's how I honor my parents. It's how I honor my heritage. So my name is Carla
Mm.
Santamaria. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a career coach and the host of the First Gen Coach podcast. I have been coaching since 2021, and I work predominantly with first gen Black and Brown women. And I've helped my clients reach over $500,000 in salary increases.
Hey, okay. So tell us about growing up in Honduras.
Sure thing. So, oh man, so I was born in Honduras, and I was born in the major city in Honduras, San Pedro Sula. So it was very close to the coast. I mean, Honduras is a small country, which I didn't know at the time, but looking back, uh, and I was, I think I had a pretty happy childhood. I got to see my cousins, my primos, my tios, my tias, my grandma, my grandparents on my dad's side. My mom's parents passed away before I was born, but I did get to see my dad's parents. We would go to the beach in Cortes. My mom had a small boutique store, and just una tienda. That's I don't think she would ever have called it like a boutique store, but just thinking back to it, that's kind of what it was. And my dad had a business with glass and mirror, so like shower doors, and also a lot of vitrinas, which are like display cases, so that kind of thing. Let's see. I remember living very, very close. So actually, it was walking distance between, like, on one block was like my house, and then around the block was my mom's store and my dad's business. So, very, very small community. And let's see, so I'm one of four girls. Three of us were born in Honduras. So when I was in Honduras, I was the middle daughter. I guess I'm still, second to four. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I remember we went to private school, and it was the private school was aligned with the US academics calendar. So it was September through June. Let's see. I don't know what else. I mean, I just, it was fun. I had a very happy childhood.
Okay, so few questions. So, okay, first of all, you were surrounded by entrepreneurs. Your mom had her own store, your dad had his own business. So, I feel like did that kind of drive your entrepreneurship spirit with like launching your coaching and your podcast?
Absolutely not.
No.
So, we'll talk about this because I
Okay.
used to, yeah, I have an intro like slide when I do a couple of webinars and workshops
Okay.
when I say that I'm a first gen everything. But the only thing I'm not first gen of is being a first gen entrepreneur. And as
Yeah.
a career coach, like one of the things that I grew up thinking, and we'll talk about the American dream later on, but
Yes.
one of the things that I grew up thinking is that you had to get like an office job, and that was actually the
Mm,
goal, that was
interesting.
how you lived a better life. Like to me, entrepreneurship, because that was, when we moved to Honduras, reality changed, and we'll talk about that when we moved to the US.
Well, okay, yes. Yes. Got it. Okay. And so four girls, three of you guys were born in Honduras, and so I'm assuming the youngest one was born here in the United States. So how was that? Like, or how old were you when you guys moved, and what you remember, how was that transition, your parents with three girls moving to the US?
So I was very young, so I was 8. We moved
Mhm.
to the US about a month before my ninth birthday. So yes, I was very young, and I remember my mom moved to the US a little bit beforehand, before we did. So I think it might have been May, and
Mhm.
then we followed in August. So I was very young, and we moved to the US, and I remember thinking that our quality of life was better. And
Mhm.
maybe I didn't necessarily have that language,
Yeah.
but here's what I remember. When we moved to the US, our house, like our apartment, because we definitely moved to a small one-bedroom apartment. We lived there for a
Mm.
year, then we lived, in a two-bedroom apartment. And I remember thinking that our life was better in the US, even though I could like intellectualize that we had less money. Like I
Okay.
remember
Okay.
thinking, yeah, I remember thinking that we were poor when we moved to the US.
Mhm.
Because, like in Honduras, my parents had their own businesses and we went to private school. And in the US, I was going to public school. And in the US, we went from moving, living, I mean, in Honduras, we lived in a house with a backyard, we had two dogs. And in the US, we moved to an apartment. In
Yeah.
Honduras, we had two cars. And in the US, we had zero cars, and then my parents got a
Wow.
car that first year. And so I remember thinking, that like I am poor here,
Yeah,
which is
yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, but I also remember thinking, even though I am poor in the US, it is better than being like how we were in Honduras. Because I
Mhm,
never consider myself like rich in Honduras, but
mhm,
I
mhm.
remember thinking like even though I go to public school in the US, it's much bigger and nicer than my private school in Honduras. Even though it's an apartment, it has air conditioning. Our house in Honduras did not. Like there was no bars on our windows in our house. So
Yeah,
like even though like I was kind of like seeing these things, like noticing the differences.
yeah,
And I was young. I was
yeah,
8,
8 years old.
so
Yeah, you're a
yeah.
child.
Hmm.
Wow, that's interesting how, a child can look at that and put those things together. But I definitely understand what you mean, especially with me like visiting DR and everything and just seeing how things are different over there, like the whole air conditioning thing. Like people who have air conditioning in DR is because, they're high class, they're rich, right? There's only air conditioning in like the buildings and things like that. If not, like you just have fans and stuff like that. And I'm also thinking about like the school system. Same thing in DR. The majority of the kids go to private schools, obviously if they can afford it, because the public school system over there is like really, really bad, right? So just even so I can see what you're saying, like even with the school difference, it's like, okay, I'm going to a public school here, but it's bigger and nicer than my own private school, back home. And so, do you know what events actually led your parents to move to the US?
So I, yes, I remember like the microcosm, like the event that happened in my family that made them make that decision. But my undergrad is in sociology, my master's degree is in community psychology. So the macrocosm, the reason is, like US interventionism in Latin America. We
Oh,
know that the United States played a role in dismantling the economy. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like that's the big reason. Like the societal context of what was going on. But I guess how that trickled down into my family, my mom's tienda, my mom's store was broken into.
Mm,
And the way that my parents told me this story, and I might ask them again,
yeah,
because
yeah.
it's been a while, but the way that my parents told me this story, my mom realized, hey, we have three young daughters that, and we have them in private school. Like I have my store, your dad has his business. We could be a target. Like we could
Mm,
be a target for
yeah,
kidnapping. Like it could be like people might see us and think that we have money and that, like that would make us a target. So I think that that was the incident that really led my mom actually was the driver of this decision to like pursue a better life in the United States where we could be safer.
yeah. Wow. So they were trying to prevent, it wasn't like, I mean, the break-in had already happened, but they were trying to prevent, future being targeted in future events. Oh my goodness. And so when you first moved to the US, do you remember or any memory, first memory that you have of the first cultural shock that you experienced? Hi, Heidi here. Thank you so much for listening and supporting my podcast, but most importantly, the mission. If you would like to further support this podcast, there are a few ways you can do that. You can sign up for the newsletter. You'll receive the episodes straight to your inbox every time they drop. The link is in the show notes and the show description. You can subscribe to the podcast YouTube channel. And lastly, you can donate money. That link is also in the show notes and show description. If you would like to sponsor an episode or promote your business on this show, send me an email at Heidi at HeidiDelacruz.com. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the episode.
Yes. So I definitely remember. So the day that we moved to the US, I remember we spent like half the day in the airport in Honduras for some reason. Like our flight was delayed, or no, I think that we were flying because my tia worked for American Airlines and she got us those like the standby
The
tickets or something
standby,
like that.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So I remember that. So we got to the United States very, very late at night. I
Mm,
don't even remember where we spent that first night. Like now that I'm thinking about it, I don't remember. But the next day
mhm.
we were at, and remember, this was in 2000. I don't know if I've shared that. We moved to the US in 2000. So like 8 months after Y2K, and we
Wow.
moved to
Okay.
Miami. And my mom was staying with her friend in South Beach. So think of like Art Deco, Miami, the year 2000. So picture that and picture little Carla going into this Walgreens, this like pharmacy, and this guy in front of me dropped some coins. And I was like, Senor, Senor, like, trying to tell him that he dropped his coins. And then I was like, excuse me, and then he turned around. And I was like, oh shit. I mean, I definitely didn't say that as a kid, but I remember like, it was like, why is he not listening to me? And then
Yeah.
I switched to English. And that's when he turned around and, paid attention to me. And that happened like my first day here.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh. Did you learn English back home or in the United
Yes.
States? Back home?
Yes. Well, I mean, yeah. So the school that we were in, it was an American school, so we learned
Okay.
English. I mean,
Okay.
about as much English as an 8-year-old can learn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. But so how was that transitioning to the school to the US? Because you said it was you guys follow the US calendar. You learned English over there. So how was that transition for you from on school in Honduras to the school in the US?
Sure thing. So in Honduras, I had just completed third grade. And in the US, the cutoff for the birthdays for the academic year is September 1st. But my birthday is September 6th. And so they enrolled me in third grade again. And my mom was not having it.
Oh.
My mom, who's been living in the US for one hot minute, went up to the, yeah, you know, she was, yeah, my mom is, like, doesn't speak English and just like turned her life around. And
Yeah.
rather than saying, like, all right, that's just how it goes in the US, she was like, you're not doing this to my daughter. You're not stealing a year of her life. So she went up to the administration, ended up talking to the assistant principal, then to the principal. I think she told me she ended up talking to like the superintendent of Dade County Public Schools, which is a very like it's like the second or third largest public school county in the country. And she
Yeah.
was like, you're not doing this to her. She already finished third grade,
Yeah.
and I might cry because I think this was just so powerful,
Of
so my mom ended up
course.
getting, yeah, like, so she ended up getting like my report cards from my school in Honduras. And then they, like saying like, look, this is the report cards. This is her
Hmm.
homework. This is the curriculum, like test her out. And so, after some time, I don't know if it was a week or I mean, it's probably longer than a week. So I don't know if it was like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or maybe even a month and a half
Yeah.
or maybe 2 months. I don't know. I was a kid, they moved me to fourth grade. So my mom was able to advocate on my behalf for
Yeah.
me to be in the appropriate grade level. And yeah, that was just so powerful. I didn't realize that until I was an adult that I was like, man, my mom, a brand new immigrant, showed up and showed out for her kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm getting chills just thinking about that because normally when you know, new immigrants they come, they just are trying to adapt to the system and then just go with the flow. It's like, okay, that's just like you said, like she could have just been like, oh, that's just how it is. But then she was like, no, my daughter already completed third grade. You're not gonna do this to her. You're not gonna steal like, and she, went up the ranks and she advocated as, like you said, a freshly new immigrant, barely speaking the language, but she did it. And that's amazing. That's really, really powerful right there. So that's just to let people know in the audience, do not let anything hold you back from advocating for yourself, for your kids. If you know you're right, you're right. And, if you keep hearing the word no, you're speaking to the wrong person. So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. And so let's talk about visiting Honduras for the first time after moving to the US.
I think we moved to the US in 2000. The first time I visited Honduras was in 2016. So
Wow.
yeah. Yeah, so a lot of time had passed. So I didn't visit Honduras for 16 years. I just remember visiting my grandma and oh my God, the day I went to Honduras, like the day after the election happened, the
Oh,
2016 election, I
oh
was crying in the
man.
airplane.
Oh, that
So
day, that day.
yeah, yes. So I was like crying in the airplane, and then in Honduras, like crying in the car. It's just, we went to see a soccer game from La Selección, like the national team, and I was just
Yeah.
like crying in the stadium. But
Oh
other than
man.
that, yeah. But other than that, I got to see my grandma for the first time in 16 years.
Oh.
That was the most special moment. I got to see some of my cousins and the ones who hadn't visited the US who didn't, so it was just like really beautiful. I got to see the house where my mom grew up in, like it was very, very special.
Yeah, I bet it sounds very, very special. I do love asking that question about like the first time being able to go back because it's just such a sentimental thing, and especially because it does take immigrants about 10 years, a lot of times depending on what country they come from and their status and things like that. It does take them an average about 10 years to be able to like save up and be able to go back and depending on how many family members they have. So I'm really glad you were able to go back and visit. Have you been thinking about starting your very own podcast? Well, I created a podcast course to help you launch your podcast without feeling overwhelmed and with simplicity. Okay. So it is a 6 week podcast course. Each video is less than 15 minutes long, so it doesn't take that much time to get through and it breaks down the steps that you need to launch your podcast. Again, 6 weeks or less. So you can do it faster than 6 weeks, or you can take longer than 6 weeks. It's all up to you. You do it at your pace. And you will get lifetime access to this course. In addition to the 6 modules or the 6 videos, you also get videos about editing, you'll also get the podcast digital planner, which helps you create your content and helps you with the episode outline. It helps you with the show notes outline. It helps you stay on track with the podcast cycle checklist. It has the guest intake form and also a Google Sheet episode organizer to make sure that you are organized and set up from the jump to be able to plan out your content, organize your episodes, because that is key to long-term podcasting, right? You'll also get 3 exclusive interviews with leading podcasters who are killing it in the industry. And in addition to all of that, you will also get the podcast workbook, like how to launch a podcast workbook that goes along with each module. So you can watch the videos and then also follow along with the workbook. All of that is included in the course. If you are interested, head over to my Stand store. The link is in the show notes and the show description. So you can sign up for the course. And there's also a referral program included. If you refer someone to me to launch their podcast and they sign up for the course, I will give you $50. That's right. You will receive $50 if the person you referred does sign up for the podcast course. So all the information is in my Stand store. If you have any specific questions, you can always email me at Heidy@HeidyDeLaCruz.com, and let's get your podcast launched. And I want to know, what did you study in college? What did you get your degrees in?
So my undergrad, so I went to 3 schools for undergrad.
Me too.
Oh, nice. I love that.
Yes.
That's usually, it's like people usually only go to one.
No, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, but anyways, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay. All right. So I got my associate's degree from the Honors College at Miami-Dade College. So that was 2 years. Then I transferred to Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, because as you know, before we started recording, I grew up Mormon. I was raised Mormon, and that was what you did when you were a good little Mormon kid. You applied to BYU. So then I went to BYU, and my associates, I think, was in psychology, and I wanted to be a speech pathologist. I think part of it is that there was one of the only few careers I knew about because my youngest sister. Yeah, my youngest sister had been in speech therapy. So I was like, sure, I'll be a speech pathologist. I know, super cute. Anyway, so I get to BYU and oh my God, it was so boring. It was so boring. It was, I stuck it out through the first semester, and then the second semester, it was the only class I ever dropped in college. The professor was talking about vocal cord vibrations for like 3 straight lectures. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I do not care about vocal cords this much. And so that's when I realized, I'm like, this is only going to get worse. Like, if I am this bored right now, and there's no way that I'm going to continue doing this, I need a different degree. So that's when I decided to change my major. And at the time I was going to major in, I think I decided sociology and minor in economics. So I was in BYU, came to Miami for the summer. And then my younger sister, the one who's 2 years younger than me, she was like, Carla, why don't you just go to FIU and, Florida International University in Miami, Florida, which, by the way, now just got funding. Our stadium is now called Pitbull Stadium. Hey! Yes. So, Carla, why don't you just go to FIU? And I was like, oh, why don't I just like, I didn't have a good reason. And again, that was also, it felt like at the time, because I was Mormon, I would answer like, oh, because God told me to. Like, again, it was like a divine download. So I transferred to Florida International University, and I'm so glad I did. Like, as I shared, I ended up leaving Mormonism, and that was a whole thing. So I'm so glad that like my degree does not reflect that Mormon institution. So and in Miami and at FIU, I studied sociology and anthropology, and I minored in Latin American studies and Brazilian Portuguese.
Nice. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that. And on your podcast, you have an episode, right, that talks about your experience of leaving Mormonism, right?
Yes, episode 18. Yeah.
Perfect.
So if you want, I can send it to you.
Yes, I can definitely. Yeah, we can plug that in for people to go to your podcast to listen to that if they're interested. But thank you for sharing that and your whole journey of finally getting your degrees. Because same thing, I was like, I went to different schools, so much so that like I ran out of FAFSA because I went to like so many schools and I wasn't graduating. So there, like, I had like literally a red flag on my account. So yeah, it was a whole thing. So
Wow.
yeah, it's crazy. But I wanted to ask about your coaching. So how you got into it, and because you mentioned a little bit earlier that you did not want to be an entrepreneur at all. So how did this come about?
Sure thing. So my parents had raised me, and I remember having been very, very young. So I must have been like 9 or 10 years old. That first or second year in the US, I was talking to my dad, and he was telling me, all of this in Spanish, of course, that, in the United States, education is very expensive. So you have to make sure to get good grades so that you can get a good scholarship and go to college.
Hmm.
And I promise you that was like my marching orders because I became a straight A student. I don't know if I would have been a straight A student regardless, but I
Yeah.
became a straight A student and I knew that I would have to get a scholarship to go to college. Like that was
Hmm.
just, I'm not sure if he meant it to like impact my subconscious to that level,
Yeah.
but it did. Um, so and I saw my parents struggle. Like my mom worked a lot of jobs and my dad did too. Eventually he started his own business. And, of course, like, like all Latinos, like there's a lot of work that women do, but after my parents were divorced, like my parents, struggled. And again, my mom, like I just saw them struggle a lot,
Yeah.
and like with my dad's business, I also remember seeing him like just like struggling to pay the bills. And to
Mm.
me, that's what I thought entrepreneurship was. And I remember thinking like I just want a job where I just have to worry about doing my job. I don't have to worry about bringing in money. And like because my parents have both worked jobs where they're like outside, they wanted me to have an office job where I had like air conditioning, I could sit at a desk all day.
Yeah.
Like that's supposed to be the you made it. And
Yeah.
so after I finished my undergrad, I became an AmeriCorps. So it's like the domestic Peace Corps.
Okay.
So I was still living at my dad's house because, I was making like $1,000 an hour. I mean, $1,000 a month
An
living in
hour.
Miami.
Wow.
I know, right? I would have still done that. $1,000 an hour, sign me up. Uh, but no, so I was making $1,000 a month working full time. And remember my dad asking me like, why'd you go to college to become a volunteer? And I was like, I don't even know, man. So again, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Eventually, I started my, my graduate program. And after my graduate program, I got a job and it was like what I consider like my first like big girl job. Even though I had been
Yeah.
working professionally for a very long time, I was the director at the Institute for Civic Engagement and Democracy at Miami-Dade College. So I went back to the school that had opened so many doors for me. And I was just so, so,
Yeah.
so grateful. And my parents' friends would be like, ¿Cómo está la directora? Like, how is the director doing?
Hey.
Right?
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. So it was, yeah, it was like such a big, like, I made it moment,
Yeah.
like I made it like this, and I know that, the show is focused on the American dream. I'm going to pause because when I graduated from undergrad and I walked across the stage and I held my diploma up in the air, I had this moment of like, I made it.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Oh.
yeah. So that was, and I remember, one of my interviews for like a grad school job, they were like, what's your proudest moment? And I was like walking the stage when I got my undergraduate degree. Like my parents moved me
Yeah.
from Honduras for that moment. But anyway, then, I started grad school, finished grad school, got my little job in an office with a window in downtown Miami with this title of directora. Oh my gosh, I thought I had made it. Girl, I wasn't making any money.
Oh man. You had
Like,
the
that's the
title, but no
problem.
money.
Exactly. I was making $51,000 a year. And you know that that's only like $200 above the federal cutoff level for um like government resources. Like even the
Oh
government was like,
man.
Carla, are you okay? You have no money. And so, but here's the thing though, like I didn't know anyone making more money. The only people
Yeah.
that I knew were, like doctors, lawyers,
Yes.
like professors.
Engineers. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. And so the reason that I say that is that I had this job where I thought I made it and I wasn't making any money, and like fast forward to 2020, we have the pandemic. I remember sitting at home and just trying to think like, me and my partner wanted to buy a house at that time. And I was doing math and it just wasn't mathing. And I was like, I just need to make more money. So I kind of had this desire that I was like, unfortunately, I knew I was going to leave higher education because I
Mm,
knew I needed to earn more. And, like I wanted to buy a house. So, while we were quarantined and I had been working in higher education and college access for a decade, right? Um, I would make this joke like, oh, ha ha ha, I should be a career consultant. And I
mm.
made that joke because I had a student that I worked with like 3 years prior who had graduated, sent me an email, asked for some career advice. And then there was somebody I hadn't even met who had reached out to my boss, and my boss is like, actually, the person you want to talk to is Carla. So I'm giving advice to this stranger, like, ha ha ha, I should be a career consultant. I had been doing that for such a long time,
Yeah.
but because I worked in higher education, I thought everybody did that, like I
Yeah.
thought
Yeah.
everybody, yeah, I thought everybody did that. And then when I was on my way out of that higher ed job, I was working with two of the young professionals that were actually vistas. And I was, like one of them was thinking about grad school, one of them was thinking about job, and I kept on having the same career conversations with them. And then I had this moment of like, oh, I should be a career coach,
Yeah.
So like I used to say like I should be a career coach, ha ha ha. And then I was like, no, I should,
Yeah.
So that's how I want to say that was April 2021. It took me until June to like call myself a career coach and like make a post on Instagram. I didn't know anything about running a business. I thought it was, posting on Instagram. So yeah, in January 2022, I hired my first career coach and she actually helped me start signing clients. And that's kind of how I started with, like my coaching business. There was two things. One of them was like this realization that my 9 to 5 salary was not was not enough for the life that I
Yeah.
wanted to live. And then the other thing is realizing that like, wait, hold on, I actually do have this skill, that
Yeah.
people come to me for. And I will say that in that moment where I said like, oh, I should be a career coach, I I was on my way out of higher ed and I doubled my salary in 10 months. So I job hopped.
Hey.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, I feel like, wow, I can't believe I did that. So I left higher ed to work in healthcare. And so I went from making 51K to making 65K. I was in healthcare for 10 months. Healthcare is not for me. It was just not for me. I'm like, I need to get out of here. So then yeah, then I transitioned to tech, and that's when I started making 6 figures. So in 10 months, I doubled my salary, and I started also my coaching business.
Nice. Oh my goodness. And so how do you help clients?
Yes. So I'm a career coach, but it's much more, I think I approach career coaching from a very holistic perspective. I've called myself a career and mindset coach, because I've said this even before I started my coaching business, like the personal is professional, the professional is personal. How we show up at work, like the influences that we bring
Hmm.
matter. That shows up like how we matter. So like with my clients, oh my God, I hate doing resumes. Like it's not even like the thing we don't like. I just like it's not. We'll do resumes, but that's like one thing. Like maybe 5% of what we do. The other thing that we do is really helping them identify and clarify what they want from their life, and
Mm.
then what skills they have, helping them identify their transferable skills so that they can find a career that supports that life. Like one of my
Oh,
very first clients, yeah, in 2022 when we started working together, she told me that she just wanted to travel. She was like, I just want a job where I can travel, where I can take my laptop and travel. And after our coaching agreement, like after we stopped working together, we actually became great friends. And then I would see her on Instagram, and she was traveling. Like she was based out of California. She was like in North Carolina. And I messaged her. I was like, Caro, do you remember? Like you're living the dream. And like
yeah.
she's talked about this in my podcast. I was like, do you remember how you told me what you wanted? Like was to travel, and like you picked the job. We worked together, and like you chose the job where you're now living your dream. And so that's the thing. It's helping them identify like my clients, like their transferable skills. Like another one of my clients, she she knew that what she wanted was to start a family, and she wanted a job with better boundaries so that
Mm.
she could start the family. And she was unhappy in her current workplace, and then they offered her a promotion. And she was like, no, because I'm gonna leave. Like, I don't want to take it, yada, yada, yada. So we coached on it. The next time they talked, she was like, you know, I realized, like what you said, that if I'm already doing the work anyway, I might as well get paid for it. So she applied the promotion for the promotion, got a 13K raise. And then 4 months later, she got another job offer, got a 17K raise. So in that 5 month period, she raised her salary by 30K
Yeah.
and she got pregnant, and like,
Aw.
I know. So I was like, oh my God, like, this is what you wanted. Like, you told me from the very first time that we met that you wanted to start a family and that you wanted better work-life balance. And so, like, this is a story. It's like, to me, yes, career coaching, I mentioned, like $500,000 in salary increases. And that is the tangible and the quantifiable. But really, the building the life that they want is like my approach to career coaching.
Oh, I love that. And you just glow when you're talking about it and you get so happy. So I love that. Oh my goodness. So let's talk about your podcast. So what do you talk about on your podcast and why did you start your podcast?
Sure thing. So my podcast is called the First Gen Coach Podcast, and I I'm in a little bit of a revamp. We'll see. Mentally, I'm in a revamp. I haven't actually taken any steps
Okay.
because my intro it's just not me. My intro is kind of like very soft, like welcome to the First Gen Coach, and that's just not how I talk.
Yeah.
And I think I introduced, like, I'm a civic engagement professional turned mindset and career coach. Like, it's just I'm gonna redo my intro, but let me tell you what it is. It is about career. It is about self-advocacy. It is about money. It is about unlearning limiting beliefs. So
Mm.
it's really, I talk, it's like career empowerment and lifestyle and, wealth building.
Okay, awesome. And we'll definitely include your link to your podcast in the show notes so people can go and listen. And Carla, thank you. Oh my gosh, this has been amazing. And the last question that I always love to ask my guests because, it's very different for everyone, but, it's for them. So, what does the American dream mean to you?
Wow. This is a big one because I there's a part of me that was like a little jaded, a little salty. Like, the American dream is broken promises. The American, like, that's so,
Yes.
like, at first, but even as you asked me about, like, what I do with my career coaching, and like helping people build a life that they want and like unlearn limiting beliefs, like, I think maybe having the opportunity to build a life that you want. I think
Yeah.
that's the American dream.
That word opportunities comes up a lot in this answer
Yeah.
when people answer. So
Mhm.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Is there any last words that you want to leave the audience with? Maybe words of encouragement or anything like that. Anything that you want to leave the audience with.
Yes, yes. So two things. One is, I just want to give a big shout out to Honduras because Honduras is lovely and it is truly a beautiful place. It has more rainforest than Costa Rica, but Costa Rica gets all the good press and we get all the bad press. Yeah, like Honduras is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. And like, some of the economic instability that happened, forget about the 80s and like the US intervention in the 80s. Like, there was a US government coup d'etat in 2009. Like,
Mm.
the US government has destabilized Honduran economy and society for decades. And so just know that if you hear bad press, it's Ronald Reagan's fault. So just to clarify, like, huge shout out to Honduras. It's a beautiful place. Second thing is that you're worth it. Like, what you're meant for bigger and better things, and you deserve to go after them. I talk a lot on my podcast about self-advocacy and boundaries because you need to personally believe that you're worthy of the life that you want. And that's the first step towards actually building it. So those dreams that you have, they're great. They're safe. It's okay to want more money. It's okay to want a higher salary. It's okay to want to do a complete change in your career. All of your dreams are valid and they're safe, and you deserve to go after them.
Oh, what a perfect way to end the podcast. But last thing, where can people connect with you?
Sure thing. So I am on Instagram at Carla the First Gen Coach. You can also find my podcast at the First Gen Coach Podcast, and you can get on my email list. So you can actually download my resume template guide and freebie, which is at thefirstgencoach.com/resume. That'll add you to my email list so that you can always get, like updates about upcoming webinars or, podcast spots like this one.
Perfect. And for everyone in the audience, you guys already know the links will be in the show notes and in the show description for YouTube. Carla, thank you so much for this. It's been a pleasure to hear your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Mommy Podcast.